Nope.
Okay.
All right, are we ready to roll?
I think so.
All right, folks, if I could have your attention, we'll get this meeting started. Good evening, everybody. My name is Dave Benfrud. I'm police chief for the city of Way Park, and I'd like to welcome you here tonight. Thank you for taking the time. Right now, all of our attendance is in person. We did offer a Zoom or virtual access. We don't currently have anybody there, so it looks like this might be the group for tonight. So this is the first time, at least in my time here, and I think as far as I recall, the first time in Way Park's history, I think, where we've actually had a community notification, an education meeting for a sex offender. We have a lot of experience, and we interact regularly with levels 1 and 2, which Brad will explain later. So a level 3 offender. This is our first experience with that, and we have with us tonight Brad Vandergett from the Department of Corrections. Brad's going to be really, for the most part, going through a brief PowerPoint and just explain the situation and how these work. This is not his first rodeo. It happens quite a bit across the state, and I'm sure across the country. So this is not like it's the first time this has ever occurred. So Brad, I don't want to step on your toes here as far as if this is interaction. If you have questions, if you'll take questions during the presentation, we would just ask that you come up to the microphone. We are going to record this so that it's available to others who maybe couldn't be here tonight because of the roads or whatever, or couldn't jump online. So just I guess be aware of that. But if you do have questions, and we encourage that, please step to the podium so we can get it on record and everybody can hear. So with that, Brad, I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you, Chief, and thank you. As Chief said, we really do appreciate you coming out. It's going to be a recurring theme in what I'm going to present to you today, is that well-informed community is genuinely a safer community. And so I just personally want to thank you for taking the time out of your evenings on a weeknight to come out and get this information. And for those that weren't able to attend tonight, I'm glad to hear that it'll be made available to them, a recording of this, so that they can view it later. So if you know of anybody that couldn't make it tonight, please do let them know to check out the recording. I think for the purposes of time, I want to make sure I'm respectful of your time. I know you all probably have to get to work tomorrow and so on. It does work best, I find, if I go through the PowerPoint in its entirety and hit commonly asked questions that typically come up. With a smaller group, like I'm talking like less than 5 people, we can usually do a more interactive. But if you guys, I think we're wanting to do more, we don't want to be here until 10 p.m. And so if it makes more sense, we'll do it straight through the PowerPoint. I encourage you to maybe jot down on like your phone or something, like a note if you have a question, if something pops up. For those that may come in online or who are watching online, certainly you can jot a question in the chat as well, and see if it doesn't get answered throughout the presentations course, and if it does not, by all means, then at the end when we open it up to a formal Q&A, we'll have you come up to the lectern and ask, okay? So with that, I'd like to just jump kind of right into the presentation. I think the best place to begin with conversations like this, where we're talking about those registered individuals, be it 1, 2, or 3, in and around communities throughout the state, is to really start with what we all know as society in general. And that is that registered offenders, those who commit these types of assaults and harm, they exist. They've existed in our communities and in society far before notification ever came online. And so the real question is then, well, what are we doing as a result of those who we have come to know and identify as those registered individuals? And so once I can get my clicker to work with me here, it must have went to sleep on me.
Uh-oh.
We had it work, and I wonder
You
if
want me to advance it?
Yeah, would you? Just give me the Or maybe it'll come awake once you,
Well,
these technical difficulties.
it was working.
There we go. Okay, good. All right, we're back. So really, my presentation is going to come in kind of 3 distinct parts. We're going to set kind of that foundational information so that we're all kind of operating on that same basis of knowledge. Every one of us in this room has some level of knowledge about this topic. I want to make sure that we're all on that same page. Then I'm going to use that basic information and knowledge as an overlay as we get into the specifics about the man you're here to learn about tonight. And then I'll go on to some resources for you, for your family safety planning, and larger community safety planning efforts. And so there's that slide I was just kind of talking about. Registrants live in and among Minnesota throughout the state. There is no place in the state where a registered predatory offender does not reside, just period. There is nowhere where they are not located. So again, that question then, okay, Brad, we get that, right? So what is it the state's doing to address those who we've identified and brought into this state risk management system? So one of the first and probably most predominant components of that risk management system is the registry, okay? And the registry came online in the early 90s as all these laws are starting to happen following the abduction of Jacob Wetterling. And the Wetterling family and then on into other advocacy groups really went out to law enforcement after that tragedy occurred and said, what more can we do to assist and aid law enforcement in the job that they have to hopefully effectively as possible police this population? And law enforcement really said resoundingly, what we need is a system that collates our information, that brings it all together. Because prior to the registry, this information was stored in-house. And so Waite Park PD would have a file on someone that they encountered or investigated, but perhaps not St. Cloud PD. And only until St. Cloud PD would experience an issue with that person would they then communicate that information. And so it was a reactionary system. But with the registry, what it is now law enforcement across the state and even beyond can go onto this registry and query it if they're encountering any issues or concerns they may be having so that they can quickly whittle down or narrow their search to those primary individuals who they may want to talk to further about any number of potential issues that are going on. So the registry is maintained and managed by the state's Bureau of Criminal Apprehension, the BCA. It is not maintained by the Department of Corrections. And the law that created and structures the registry stipulates that all the information collected and maintained within it is for law enforcement purposes only and correctional purposes only. And so it therefore is not public information. One common misperception is if you go onto the Department of Corrections website, you may look onto the the public registrant search function. Oftentimes people think that's the registry, and I'll get phone calls saying, why can't I find this person? I know they should be a registered sex offender. And the reason why is the registry is not for public information. Public cannot access it. Some of the information collected and maintained by the registry, in case you're curious, is addresses of the individual registrants. Those are primary addresses and secondary addresses. So places they may frequent or places they may often visit. So think of places like their rental properties. If they have like a cabin or something that they may frequent, a significant other's home or a loved one's home that they're going to with some frequency, they must also register that with law enforcement. So that's the secondary address component. Other things they have to register, their employment, all employment. If they operate a motor vehicle for that employer, they must register that as well. And so having been a supervising agent myself for a number of years, one of the questions would come up if I had a guy on my caseload and he says, well, Brad, I work for this delivery service and they have a fleet of 100 trucks. Do I have to register them all? I say yes. If you may operate them, then you must register them. And so that is literally how significant that is. They have to be known. Every vehicle they drive, they'd better be registered in it. That also includes any vehicles that they own, that they may possess or have on their property. So if the old junker broken down in the back corner needs to be known to law enforcement as well. Any schools that they may be attending, colleges, tech schools, vocational schools, etc., must be known to law enforcement. And they must also make known to law enforcement other things that they may rent, like storage lockers or storage units and things of that nature. Their phone number and anything else like that. Tattoos, they have to be documented and photographed, so law enforcement always has the most accurate and up-to-date information on them at all times. So the next question that'll often come up, oh, this thing goes to sleep really fast. Sorry, you guys, there we go. Whoop.
Oh.
Oh, hold on, I think I might have did that. There we go. Mashed the keys. Hold on, I'm not ready for that slide just yet. So the next question that often comes up when it comes to the registry is, well, then who is required to go on to the registry? Because as some of you may recall, it used to be known as the Sex Offender Registry, and then the state changed it to the Predatory Offender Registry. And so as you can see here from this slide, it changed and grew over the years. From the early 90s, where it was only those charged with or convicted of sex offenses that were required to be on it, the state saw the benefit of this database and expanded it to include those individuals that may have been convicted of non-sex specific crimes such as kidnapping or false imprisonment. And so this is why we've changed the name to the Predatory Offender Registry. And as I go forward tonight, just to keep it straight in your mind, because I'll be throwing it out a lot, it's easy just to keep it straight to go, okay, all sex offenders are predatory offenders, while not all predatory offenders are sex offenders. So as we go forward, just use that as a way to kind of anchor that piece. This is going to be a finicky clicker tonight, I think. Can you advance it?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Did that work?
Nope. Sure didn't. Oh,
There.
there we go. All right. So I spoke earlier about how that broader awareness is just so very critical when you're thinking about the term sex offender, and that I mentioned that they likely live and probably do live in all communities in Minnesota. This is just to really drive that home, okay? As of the first of this year, there were approximately 18,727 registered predatory offenders in our state. And as of today, when I pulled these numbers most recently, now a couple things. First and foremost, remember, these numbers are dynamic, okay? They constantly are fluctuating. These folks do move with some frequency. But as a snapshot, kind of a 30,000-foot flyover view, you can see what was going on in and around your own communities. So Stearns County, for example, had 429 registered predatory offenders within its boundaries. Those are all of the registrants. Those are those with no risk level assigned, levels 1, 2, or 3. And the smaller number there to the right, as you can see, is 9. 9 of those registrants are subject to broad public notification. And so as you're thinking about the totality of this thing, have in your mind the analogy of a funnel, okay? And from what we know from our data and resources that are out there nationally is that of those sex crimes that occur in communities, only a fraction of them go on to get reported at all. And of those that are reported, only a fraction of those will go on to be charged out. And of those charged out, only a portion will go on to receive sentences and convictions. And of those convicted, only a fraction of them will go to prison. And you have to go to prison to get a risk level. And so as you're wrapping your head around this, know that that broad awareness is just so critical. Let's take a look at Waite Park proper. You can see as of the snapshot here, 24 registered individuals within the city of Waite Park. Up until today's meeting, you may have been under the impression that there were none because we didn't see or were not able to see those that are not subject to this broad notification. However, law enforcement very much is aware and does know who they are and does track and monitor them. And now Waite Park has its one level 3, which is why we're here for the meeting. You can look at neighboring communities too. You can see what's going on in and around areas. I do like to point out with like Sherburne County, for example, they have 175 registered individuals there, 0 of whom are subject to broad public notification. So if you have friends or loved ones or family in Sherburne County and they say, well, we're good, we don't worry about our kids at our parks, help them understand that we want them thinking about these things too. That because you can see that just because we don't have somebody living there currently that they get to know about publicly doesn't mean that we want their awareness diminished. Next slide, please. All right, so another component of that broader state risk management system that came online after the registry is the Community Notification Act. And you can see that started up in 1997 and really follows Megan's Law that came from the federal side. And it is founded on the understanding and knowledge from all the research and data we've collected over the years that a well-informed community is, in fact, a safer community. By taking those individuals who are determined to be at that higher risk, we shine a big old light on them. And by doing that, we effectively mitigate their behavior. Your involvement in this meeting tonight is a risk mitigator. And it's critical. It's so very critical. And so I thank you again, and I thank the Waite Park Police Department and its efforts to ensure that this information gets out there. So because the Notification Act is the reason we're here at all tonight, it's worth going into more depth and detail as to how that works so you can better understand what's going to be coming up with the man you're going to learn about. And so the Notification Act, as you heard me mention with that slide with all the numbers on it, not all registrants are subject to a risk level assessment or assignment, and so they are no level assigned. That does not mean that they don't possess risk factors, it just means that they are not measured. In order for risk factors to be measured, they must have crossed the threshold of prison. That is the way it's written in the law. So unless they go to prison, not jail, so if they go to jail for a probationary sentence, that does not trigger this notification component. However, if they do go to prison, crossing that threshold, they then are subject to all of the assessment pieces. And that's any state prison or any of our U.S. territories. It does include federal prisons and military prisons. And it also includes those individuals who have been civilly committed for sex offending conduct or behavior. And so it does not apply to those individuals with stayed probationary sentences or juvenile offenders. And so that is the group where you have no level assigned. And so now with notification, then the question often goes to, okay, well then who does what? Once we have that threshold rule met and this person's crossed over, what happens next? Well, what happens next is the End of Confinement Review Committee with the Department of Corrections is tasked with the assessment of and assignment of that risk level. And the way they do that is by 90 days or sooner prior to that registered individual's release from confinement, their release from prison, the ECRC will convene and they will go over a dossier of information collected by the notification unit. And one of those key components in there is going to be a risk assessment tool known as the MnSOST, or the Minnesota Sex Offender Screening Tool. Now, it's important to understand what the MnSOST is, at least in the broader context. This is a homegrown tool built right here in Minnesota. And it started with a study that began in the 90s, early 90s, as these laws were coming online, and concluded its initial study in the early 2000s, so over a decade of research on over 3,166 known sex offenders as they re-entered the community over that period of time. And a great deal was learned. And a follow-up study was completed recently in 2007, where another 2,000 plus registered sex offenders were studied, so over 5,000 in total and more. So this is a robust set of data. And what this data did is it essentially created those known predictive risk factors, those things, those metrics that we can measure these other individuals by. So as I go forward today and I talk about level 1, level 2, level 3, know that I'm specifically referring to that data set of their peers. So when I say a person's a level 1, I'm saying they have a lower amount of known predictive risk factors as compared to that peer group. A level 2 has a moderate amount of those risk factors, and a level 3 has a higher amount of those risk factors. One thing to keep in mind and remember when it comes to risk assessment tools is this: no tool can predict the future. It does not exist. But what they do, and what they do very well, is they assist law enforcement and corrections in creating safety plans and communities to mitigate those known risk areas or eliminate them where possible. And that has proven to be highly effective. So once that risk level assessment is completed and that risk level is assigned by the committee, the handoff then goes to law enforcement. And law enforcement provides notification within the scope of that risk level assigned. So, with a level 1 registrant, law enforcement may provide notification to other law enforcement agencies, victims of or witnesses to the offense if they choose to receive that level of enhanced notification, and other immediate adult household members residing with that registrant. And that is the scope of a level 1 notification. Level 2 notification builds upon those in level 1 and includes additional individuals or entities that law enforcement determines to be at particular risk based on that registrant's known pattern of offending conduct and behavior. So, in a scenario where law enforcement's made aware of a level 2 coming into the community and they review the dossier of information that's provided to them by us, and they see that this individual focuses their harmful conduct and behavior on adult females at social gatherings. Think places like bars or concert venues. Law enforcement may determine with this notification that it does not serve a purpose to provide notification to the local daycare that serves children infant to school age. Rather, they may focus that notification on those proprietors of those bars or concert venues in this example, who are going to have much more direct impact on that public safety piece. Now, on the flip side, if we have a level 2 come into the community and law enforcement determines through their review of that packet that this person focuses their conduct and behavior on unaccompanied minors. Think teens in transit from school to after-school activities or home. And law enforcement knows within our community there is a teen hangout or hotspot. This is where they like to congregate and socialize after school. And in this scenario, law enforcement very well may choose to go to the proprietor of that hangout and say, hey, heads up, if you see this man around, we want you to give us a call, because we're going to come out and find out more about what he may be up to. And so that's the nuance of a level 2 notification. And then a level 3 notification is, we'll wait for the slide here, it's a broad public notification and includes, but is not limited to, meetings just like this. And so it really comes down to how law enforcement communicates best with its community. And again, I commend the Wake Park Police Department and all its efforts to ensure this gets out to the broadest amount of people as possible, because no doubt in my mind, each and every one of you will share this information with other people, and they will do the same, and it will proliferate, and it needs to, because that's how this is most effective. All right, couple bits of details and data from that research study that I really want to put out there for you as you're thinking about how to apply this into your family and community safety plans. First and foremost, I like to start with that narrowest end of the funnel, as that analogy I used, is the breakdowns of risk levels assigned. Now, year after year, the number of registered sex offenders that come through prison does fluctuate and change. But what stays fairly static and consistent every year is the breakdown of risk levels assigned. And as you can see, on average, the majority is those of level 1 and 2, and those folks that have limited notification abilities for law enforcement to make. On average, 15% are designated at level 3, so that smallest amount are those that we get to share more broadly and publicly. Next slide.
Oh, sorry, I'm
Nope.
trying to, we
That-
do have people online now, so,
Gotcha.
did it go?
There it is. There it
Okay.
is. So, as a snapshot again from today, if you're interested, if you were to go on to the public registrant search on the Department of Corrections website and you were to run the numbers today and say, show them all to me, you would have seen that there were 465 registered individuals subject to broad public notification, so either level 3 or previously civilly committed in Minnesota communities. And 11 of those, or actually 11 in addition to, are out of compliance. And their residency is currently unknown, and they need to be brought back into compliance with law enforcement. So again, you can see just how that broad awareness is so very critical, because we know one thing for sure, that these folks do not exist solely where their head hits the pillow at night. Quite the opposite. Where their waking hours are spent is where that awareness needs to be at its highest. And these folks are crossing all manner of boundaries and lines, community lines, municipal lines, state lines even sometimes. So just that broad awareness, again, is so critical. Thank you. Other information I want to share with you as you're contemplating all the stuff I'm throwing at you tonight is the relationships between those harmed and those who hurt them. And now this actual data was pulled from the U.S. Department of Justice, but it really aligns very well with the information and data we collected from our research study. So I'd like to share is just so you can see there's other information out there that really does correlate with what we know. And you'll see here the majority of those who hurt children are known to them. Either it's a familial relationship that they've exploited that access, or it's some kind of a knowing, an acquaintanceship, a trust relationship. And when we think about younger children, it doesn't take a whole lot to earn and gain their trust, does it? The nice guy at the corner that waves and says hello to them every day consistently is now a trusted friend, right? So it's understanding that relationship component. You'll see 7% fall into that stranger category. And that is what gives us the most pause as family and as community, as it should. Because no doubt as you're contemplating all this information, you're thinking, yeah, okay, Brad, I can manage who comes into my kid's life from my family side. I got that on, lock. I can even really vet the people that get to be friends or have acquaintances or acquaintanceships with my child. So I can have a lot of control in managing that. But that one group I don't have that direct control over is that stranger group. So it is worth going into a little more detail. One thing to know about this study is that it had its limitations. For the researchers had to create a cutoff limit of what is a knowing or an acquaintanceship. And so for the purposes of the data, they said we're going to create 24 hours. If we, through our review and assessment of all the case file information available, cannot determine that the victim and the offender knew one another for 24 hours or more, they go into the stranger category. So inevitably, what you would have is data sets that included situations or scenarios like this. Two teens meet up at a local house party. They have not known each other before this. They went to the same school, but entirely different grades and different classes. So as they meet up, the night goes the way it goes, and they leave the watchful eyes of the party. They leave the group, either to an isolated place within the house or out of the property. And the night takes an awful turn. This would be a stranger incident. But what we tend to think of more when we contemplate strangers as parents and family members is that individual with ill intent that's lurking just beyond our awareness, just outside our scope, who has nothing but bad intentions up their sleeves. That group falls into a much smaller percentage. It's about 3%. Now that is cold comfort, I am well aware. But what I want you to use with that information and knowledge is how to apply your resources most effectively. Because if we pour ourselves into that 3%, we may be missing something far more likely to be occurring around us. And so again, that broad awareness is just so critical. Another component of that research study that I want to share with you tonight as you're looking to apply this into your own family safety plans is the age breakdowns of those harmed. And if you're like me, you're looking at this chart and you're going, okay, yep, it's broken into thirds, but then very quickly you've looked over to the side and you see the age breakdowns. And you see that 2/3 are children. And you're going to look even closer and you're going to say the narrowest age ranges up there, 13 to 17, constitute 33% of those harmed. That's 9% of the population, and that's staggering. So it's worth unpacking what's going on here. Why is this the way it is? Well, what we know is that from 0 to 12, that the loved ones, the trusted adults in the child support network are very much in control of that child and who they're getting to be with and who gets to have a relationship with them. So as law enforcement and corrections agencies, we want to make sure that those trusted adults and those parents and whatnot have the ability to vet the people coming into their children's lives as best possible so that they can make informed decisions on who gets those relationships. But inevitably, what happens when we get to those teenage years? Well, it's the very thing we as a community strive to achieve for our children. And that is a place where they can safely express their individuality and their autonomy. but it's the very thing that makes them most vulnerable. Because now they're formulating relationships outside of the watchful gaze of their trusted adult support network. And so what we've learned over our years of research and study and our collaborations with victim services organizations throughout the state and beyond is that we need to get away from the older model of the talk. This was the way that was done back when I was a child, where parents would pull their teen aside at that critical age and determine, okay, now it's time. We're going to pull back the veil just enough to show them that the world is not as safe a place as it had been made to be for them when they were younger. Now, often with that kind of conversation with a teen, you would get one of two distinct reactions. You would either get, Dad, you are overreacting, you have no clue, my friends are cool people, they're not going to hurt me. Or you would get the other side of the pendulum of, I'm never going outside again. The world is far too frightening. Neither are ideal when we want our children to be out there thriving as they should and deserve to be. So what we've come up with and what we now advocate is a lot of little talks all the way up and through childhood in an age-appropriate fashion so as not to create fear, because we know that scared kids do not equal safe kids. But we also need our children to understand that nice people do not always equal safe people. And so it's having those age-appropriate conversations, building on one another all the way up into those critical teenage years where they have the efficacy and the ability that when they find themselves in a situation or scenario, they know who they can go to and how to have those conversations. So coming up, I will have some resources to start you off on that journey of augmenting and building your family safety plans to include those types of conversations. Now I want to switch gears and use the information that we've provided you so far and get right into the information about the man you're here to learn about today. This is Jimmy McCarthy. First, I want to talk to you about photographs. Photographs are updated on average of annually, or should the subject change their physical appearance in any significant way. So if you were to notice Mr. McCarthy in the community and you see that he's shaved his head bald or grown a big beard or something to that effect, by all means, do contact law enforcement to let them know. And they'll be eager to get out and obtain updated photos and submit them to the registry. And once they're posted on the registry, I'll attain them and I'll make sure that they go up onto that public website so that you always have an accurate photographic depiction of this individual for as long as he is subject to this type of notification. These are Mr. McCarthy's vitals. These are from his booking. He is currently 36 years of age. His weight may have fluctuated. Don't call me tomorrow and say, Brad, I've seen him and he's put on like 100 pounds. It's possible. It's certainly possible. This is just from his booking stuff. But he is 36 years of age, and this is a recent photograph. And he is residing in the vicinity of 5th Avenue North here in Waite Park. Now, often in conversations like this, a question will come up. Is Brad, can you tell us where he lives? It would give us a great deal of comfort to know what house he's in. And the answer, you'll recall back to my earlier information about the Predatory Offender Registry, is that that information is deemed private by law and for law enforcement purposes and correctional purposes only. However, we achieve a lot with a proximal address. No doubt that those that live around this area, if they aren't already aware, will become aware of this individual as he comes and goes. And they'll share that information among themselves with neighbors, and that's just fine. But what we don't want as police and as corrections agencies is for somebody well outside of Waite Park that has no stake of what goes on here in your community coming in and exacting some vigilante revenge scenario that does nothing to mitigate risk or reduce the potential of harm and only serves to disrupt the very thing you've all worked so hard to achieve here. And so that is why we use those proximal addresses. This is Mr. McCarthy's registrable offense history. This is not an exhaustive criminal history. We focus these meetings on the reason we're here, and that is for his registrable offense. If you are interested in an exhaustive history, it's certainly available to you. You can find anyone's criminal history on the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension's website. Just go to criminal history search. All you need is their first name, last name, and date of birth, and you have all that here for Mr. McCarthy. And I would also say that that's a great resource for parents and loved ones that may be vetting people coming into their children's lives, is to use that as a tool to vet the coach that may be coming in, or the babysitter you may be hiring, or the camp counselor that's going to be with your kids for the summer, that kind of stuff. So because this information is already available, this is literally pulled from the fact sheet, I'm just going to roll right into the next slide and get into the details of what happened. So in 2004, Mr. McCarthy was convicted of criminal sexual conduct in the 4th degree in Wright County. He engaged in sexual conduct against a 14-year-old female. He was 18 at the time. He was known to this victim, and he used that relationship or that knowing to achieve his access to her. And he used attention and affection, and I'm not speaking of like romantic attention or affection. I just mean that comfort, that he was a friend, that he was someone that could be around without anyone being too concerned about. And he arrived to her home late one night and engaged in roughhousing. They were wrestling. And through the course of this, he became more inappropriate with his conduct, and he assaulted her. She told him stop. Others were there, made him stop. She told a trusted adult, and for his crime, he was convicted and sentenced to 21 months in prison. Now you'll see here that I wrote it was stayed for 10 years. This is a probationary term. So I'm going to talk about two different things that often will come up in meetings like this. Number one, why, Brad, does someone who goes to prison for crimes like this that shock the conscience, why do they come out? And part of that answer is here in determinate sentencing. In Minnesota, we got away from the parole board system, as many and almost all states now have. And we went to a model of determinate sentencing for all our sentencing. Because what was occurring prior to that with parole boards, especially with those individuals that engaged in this kind of shocking behavior and conduct, was they would go up for parole when they were eligible, and the parole board would say, no, you're not going to get out. There's no way we're going to release you into the community where you may hurt someone again. And so they would end up sitting their entire sentence in prison. Now, as I look around the room, and no doubt for those folks that are online, I probably can imagine everyone's thought bubble is, you know what, Brad, that's just fine by us. He can sit and serve his entire time. But what we found from our data and research was that this was ineffective, because what was happening was these folks would sit until expiration, and then they would be walked to the door of the prison and told, don't come back. And our recidivism rates, our reoffense rates, reflected how ineffective that was. With determinate sentencing, what we do is now we give them an allotment of 21 months in this case, where by law, not a determination of a panel or the police or the courts, by law, they serve 2/3 of their sentence in prison, and 1/3 must be served in the community under the watchful supervision of a corrections agent. And the method to this, and the reason why this has become so effective, is all the things that they're mandated to do while they're in prison, treatment, counseling, therapy, and so on, when they come out, now they must apply it. And that agent is there every step of the way to ensure that it's being applied thoughtfully, correctly, and effectively, because they will expire. And the idea is that when they expire, we want them to have internalized these mitigation efforts and these skills so that they go on to live a quiet life once that supervision ends. So that's determinate sentencing. Now the next component stayed for 10 years. That's a probationary sentence. So the court, in effect, is saying, at this time in 2004, You're guilty of this crime. However, we are not going to place you in prison. We're going to allow you to stay in the community under supervision, like we just kind of discussed, only it's probation supervision because it's before they go to prison. And there'll be terms and conditions and expectations placed upon you for 10 years. Now, that didn't work out for Mr. McCarthy. In 2009, the court vacated that stay. They got rid of it. And they committed him. They imposed that sentence of 21 months. So he crossed the threshold of prison. He did not commit a new sex offense. That is not why he went back to or went into prison. He failed to maintain the expectations of the court. Next slide. So his prison chronology is here. So in 2009, the court said, you know what, you had your shot, Mr. McCarthy, you blew it, you're going to prison, you're doing your time. So he crosses that threshold for that criminal sexual conduct 4th degree. And in October 19th of 2009, he came up for that final third of supervision. For my number crunchers here, if you're kind of crunching numbers, know that when you're calculating the amount of time they serve, you have to take into account any credit they may have attained prior to sentencing. They're allotted credit for all the jail time they may have accumulated from the date of offense forward. So that does deviate and when you're looking at that hard 2/3. So October 19th, 2009, he is released onto supervision after having been assigned a risk level of 3 by the End of Confinement Review Committee. And he remained on supervision within the community all the way up until expiration of sentence on May 5th of 2015. So as it sits today, Mr. McCarthy is not under any correctional supervision. He is expired. He has served the duration imposed on him by the court, and his rights have been restored to him. He is free to move about society and communities as any one of us does, with the exception of the registry. He must register as a predatory offender for life. This means law enforcement must know where he works, what he drives, where he congregates or spends or frequents if he's at a secondary address or whatever, forever. And as long as he remains a level 3, you, the community, will get to know where he is. Risk levels are dynamic. They do change. A level 1 today may find if they're not engaging in the kind of conduct and behavior that's expected of them, that risk level goes up. Same can be said for a level 3. A level 3 who is shown with years of safe, quiet existence, that they have diminished their risk, they may be considered for a risk level reduction. And so that's a component as well to keep in mind. By being a 3 today does not mean that they'll stay a 3. Next slide. So as you're thinking about all this stuff that I just threw at you, think to your resources as how you can best apply it. Your first and most predominant resource available to you is your local law enforcement. If you see this man or anyone, now that your awareness is broadened, engaging in any kind of conduct or behavior that just stands out or seems off. An adult male who's hanging out with a bunch of teenagers at a park seems weird. Call law enforcement. Who knows? It could be a level 1 or a no-level assigned individual, and it'd be great for law enforcement to get that real-time information from the community, right? Or find out more information. I'm not saying call the cops all the time. Chief's over here going, Brad, don't tell them to call me every time they see a guy at the park. But genuinely, if it gives you concern or pause, reach out, connect. If it's imminent threat or harm that you're concerned about, call 911. If something just doesn't seem right, doesn't smell right, doesn't feel right to you, trust your gut. If you have a question just about community policing or those types of efforts and how the Wake Park Agency has been dealing with this population for years, certainly call their non-emergency number and they'll be happy to explain how they do their business. Other resources I want to provide to you tonight is the Jacob Wetterling Resource Center. The JWRC is one of our state's most treasured cornerstones when it comes to advocacy throughout not only the state, but the nation. And they have a deep knowledge and skill of presenting information to both children in age-appropriate and safe ways and adults. I encourage you, if you're interested, to invite them out to speak to your community watch group, to speak to your local church group, to speak to your schools. They come out and do workshops. They are fantastic. As you're thinking about how to have those age-appropriate conversations, please use them as a touchstone for how to engage in those in an age-appropriate way so that we're not frightening our children. Many times I'll be approached at meetings like this by parents who say, Brad, I have a child that's disabled or has a developmental disability. How do I talk to them specifically or uniquely? This is your best resource, or a really good resource. There's certainly others out there. Local victim services providers. In times like these, when you get notifications like this, it just jars you. It knocks you off center. There's no two ways about it. And the chief and I are all too aware of that. We know that by sending this information out, we have just taken people and spun them around. And in times like these, let's just face it, we don't have a whole lot of, patience or capability to bear any more shocks to our system, do we? So the last thing we needed today, Brad, was to sit here and listen about a sex offender, right? Use your local victim advocacy groups as a resource. The odds of someone in this room, this size, having been either directly impacted by this kind of harm or having supported somebody who's been impacted are decent. And certainly if there's people online, those odds go up even more. And so if you find that the conversation this evening has just sent you back to a place you never thought you'd go again, please, please reach out and get the support and services you so deserve. I'm going to wrap things up before we get to Q&A. If you take nothing else away from the information I've provided you tonight, please let it be this. The 3 90s and the 2 Rs. Please know that from our research and data, we've learned a great deal. And we know from that information that 90% of those who engage in this kind of harm and conduct do not go on to reoffend in the same or similar fashion. If you go on to the Department of Corrections website and you look at this data and research, which is all available to you, you will see at its highest point in the early 90s that the recidivism rate for sex offenders was at just under 17%. And that's remarkably lower than what most people believe it to be today. If I'd have pulled this room before we started and said, at what rate do you think sex offenders reoffend? I'd have been lucky to get 50%. Most would have said 100. And that is a sentiment that is not supported by the data. And so really, truly do look at that. 90% do not go on to reoffend once they've been subject to the full risk management system that we have to offer. 90% of those that do engage in this kind of harm and this kind of conduct are known to the people they hurt. And they use that relationship to exploit it. So as you're focusing your resources and attention, please let it be on those who build and establish relationships of trust. This man had that and exploited that. So what that means is on the inverse, the flip side is that those actively engaging in this kind of harm year after year, and if you go on to the Sentencing Guidelines Commission's website, you can pull up the data and statistics for every year. And you will see in no year are the sex offenses that are committed by any more than 10% of those that are known to the system. That means 90% of those that are actively engaging in this kind of harm are not known to the system as sex offenders. They have not yet been caught. And so again, that broad awareness. Oftentimes meetings like this will bring information in because victims start to feel empowered. They start to understand how they're being manipulated and coerced by those that are hurting them and start to reach out. Oftentimes after advocates come through schools and provide information to students, we see reports come in and it's amazing and it's powerful. And so be supportive of those that are making reports to you. Know how to be a supportive adult if a child is coming to you with this difficult information. Ladies and gentlemen, it really does come down to the 2 Rs. From what we know, and we know a lot, it is not about residency. It is not about geographical proximity to a place. It's about social proximity. It's about relationships. It's about trust. Because if we had everybody that was assigned or assessed at a high level and made or designated a 3 live on the moon, we'd have done nothing to impact offending conduct and behavior. It's not a drop in the bucket. What we can do is use those who we do get to talk about to understand what really drives them and use that information to make the decisions we're going to make for all the people that come into our children's lives. Last little snapshot on some additional resources. Please don't let this be the only thing you receive as far as information on this important topic. Go on to check out other resources that are available and develop and grow and augment those safety plans like we've talked about. All right, next slide. And lastly, and then we get to Q&A. As far as state resources, I already mentioned the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension for those criminal history searches. Just know that they're there and know it's a fantastic tool for you in vetting those people you may be allowing to create relationships with those you care most for. Then the Minnesota Department of Corrections, I mentioned that all the research and data that I've been talking about today is available there in its pure form, not just in these little slides, where you can look at it and you can read through it all and draw your own conclusions, and I encourage you to do that. If you can't find it on our website, certainly give me a call. My number will be at the end of this, and I will get you there so that you can read it on your own. We also maintain the Offender Locator. That is for anybody that's under the jurisdiction of the Department of Corrections. So any crime, it doesn't matter if it's a sex offense or otherwise, you can look them up on the Offender Locator and see what's going on with them, who they're working with, if they're in a facility, which one. And then lastly, that public registrant search, where I mentioned you can go on right now and you can look and you can say, show them all to me, and you can see all 460 some or whatever it was that are in the community today. All right, so I'm going to throw it back over to the chief. I think we were going to do kind of just maybe, well, Chief, I'll let you take it from here and we'll answer some questions.
Okay, sounds good. Just to echo what Brad was saying, I mean, we have regularly, we do compliance checks on sex offenders that live in Waite Park. Level 1s and 2s, we do quarterly. Mr. McCarthy will likely be more frequent than that, but we are used to doing that. We do it all the time, and I think to kind of echo what Brad was saying, I think that in my view, while I understand if it's you know, he's living near you, I understand the apprehension, but I guess I would just say that I see a huge advantage in knowing where these people are at and where we can check on them. And from my experience, I have rarely seen a offender has a classification reoffend. It's not very common. I can't think of one right now. So I think our ability to be able to check on, monitor, provide extra patrol is a strong deterrent. And the alternative is for them to be homeless and in the wind is what we call it, not knowing where they are, where they might be more vulnerable, more desperate to commit other crimes. Being homeless is not a great place to be, and that can exacerbate criminal behavior. So I guess with that, I will open it up to anybody that has questions. Shauna is monitoring online. I think we've picked up 4 or 5, 6 people online as well. So Shauna will share those questions if they come up, but otherwise, the mic is yours if you have a specific question.
And before you start with your question, Chu, just to mention, I know it's a public forum and some people just are not comfortable in coming up to the mic and asking a question. I get that. I totally get that. For those that are here physically in the room, you can just pull me aside at the end here if you want, or the chief, and ask us if you have a question specific that you don't want to just put out there. And for the folks online, certainly the numbers will be available. Please call. So with that, sir, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yes, it is.
Presence in our area. I know maybe not now that we don't need it, but come summer, the kids are out down the sidewalks and stuff. We may forget about it come June, July. Will you guys show a little bit more presence?
Yes, we
in
have
the
what
area?
we call our hot sheet, and that basically includes addresses where people are maybe in Florida this time of year, extra patrol, maybe it'd be a better descriptor. But yes, the address will be given extra attention by our officers.
Okay.
And as I indicated, we will be making contact with him regularly.
Okay.
So,
So we do got the library
In
in the
person.
area with the bar and
Yes.
the area learning centers, so just to
Yes.
make sure that,
Yes.
okay, thank you.
yep.
Thank you for your question. That was a great question. Anybody online typing a question?
Nope.
Okay. I just knocked it out of the park. Brad, we came in with the questions and you just answered them all. Yes, ma'am. Oh, we got one?
Yeah, I'm sorry, if you.
Go ahead.
The question is, with our town having a splash pad, is there any restriction for the person in question being there?
Yep.
With multiple children in an open environment, it seems like it would be a high-risk zone.
For sure, for sure. So okay, so I'll speak just kind of to the general thing, and then Chief certainly will chime in with whatever specific stuff. So it's a great question, and it's one that no doubt everyone's thinking about, and you can exchange the splash pad for other locations too that children congregate, right? We know of them as parents and community members as being potentially vulnerable places, and so that's where we want to be on our highest alert regardless of this individual. But what I will say is that yes, because his rights are restored, there's nothing that would prohibit him as far as the law from entering it. However, the proprietors, whoever runs or facilitates it, may very well be aware or hopefully become aware of him because of this meeting and advocacy and information provided by people that bring their children to that place and say, hey, if we see him here, let's really just keep an eye. I'm not saying maybe he's got a legit reason to be there. Maybe he's got a child running around, but if it's just him and a camera, I don't know. Maybe we want to contact White Park PD just to come out and make contact and just find out what he might be up to. Does that? I hope that makes sense. And I know we lose the dynamic with the person online. And it's just, it's such a great question because it really does drive home those potential areas like, well, if he shows up there, what should we do? And that is a genuine question. Well, I would say do the very same thing you would do if you saw anybody at the splash pad that might be loitering or engaging in behavior or conduct that just is out of place. If there's a father there with his kid and it all just seems to make sense, absolutely, it's probably going to be kosher. But if you see something that's just like, this seems weird, this guy's just loitering on the corner, he keeps pulling up his phone or whatever the case may be, right? Now it's time to involve at least the management of the splash pad. And then hopefully they go, you know what, yeah, this is weird, we're gonna talk to him, and if he's, confronting or, the reality is that by him knowing that everybody in the city has reviewed this information, it puts a significant amount of attention on him. And he may as well know that every person that looks at him knows who he is. And that's gonna be a significant inhibitor. And so, that's a huge piece. Again, cold comfort without a doubt, but it's just that awareness. And Chief, is there more you want to add to
Well,
that?
and I had a similar call from a community member a few days ago, and basically, he can go to the library and places like that. It's one thing if he's out for a walk, and walking on the sidewalks, and people walk all the time, but if you see something suspicious, just, it's kind of the thing, if you see something, say something. And I would encourage you, if there's something that just is not normal, or conduct that is, whether it's Mr. McCarthy or anybody else, for that matter, please call us. We want to check it out. Don't rationalize any of that suspicious behavior away like it's nothing or whatever. If you have some concerns, please call.
Okay, this kind of goes along with that, with females, teenage females seeming to be his preferred target. Has his picture been placed in the ALC area in that school so that these students know who to look out for so that they can protect themselves? Not everybody from White Park is here, so not everybody's gonna see this picture.
We certainly could. I mean, typically with some of our level twos, we've notified schools and daycares. In this particular case, we gave his picture to the media. I guess we could follow up with a letter to the schools that we could certainly do that. I guess I just maybe felt that we had done enough through the public notification, but good point, good suggestion. We could certainly let the schools know that and send them a picture.
And just to piggyback on that, I think it's a fantastic point, and it's why meetings like this are just so critical, right? Because we want to make sure that those institutions that serve children, especially those in an ALC maybe that are particularly vulnerable to people being friendly or nice or kind, are maybe more susceptible to those kinds of tactics. And so what I would always encourage too is if you have a child that's going to the ALC, is to talk with staff. One, ensure that they're aware of this individual and his proximity, and two, ask them, what kinds of things do staff do to assist children that may have questions, or to ensure that there's education and knowledge out there? I'm always a little leery of just like slapping up pictures in a hallway for kids, like caution, bad man, you know what I mean? It can generate a lot of fear and confusion. But what might be more helpful for them is so not to just kind of bubble up all that fear and anxiety, is to have an opportunity where maybe they bring in an advocacy group such as the local advocacy group here in St. Cloud, or perhaps something like the JWRC can come in and offer a more kind of like this, a more in-depth explanation for the kids, and really set them down and say, okay, here's some really important information we want you to know in an age-appropriate way. So I think it's a great conversation to have. I think it's one, particularly at this stage, for parents to be having with the ALC and its management, and as to how they see this being brought to their children. I wouldn't want the ALC to take it upon themselves to just necessarily be like, here, kids, you know, take this home in your backpack and be cautious. But I also want them to have those meaningful conversations with parents so that it can be developed in maybe even more of a actual policy or procedure in the future for information like this.
Yeah, because, I mean, not only is there the ALC, but there are several bus stops for regular kids getting on regular buses, but the ALC kids, they're at the bus, they're walking home, they're waiting for city buses on either side of the street.
For sure.
I personally don't have anybody at ALC, but I do believe that it's a conversation that needs to be had with them. And, I mean, does the public bring it up to them?
Sure, definitely.
Do the police bring it up to them?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we do safe students training in schools through our school resource officer program. Whether that's being safe about gangs or drugs or dating situations, we do those kind of trainings. So personal safety is a part of what we do. And I made a note, and we will, good suggestion. We will, like we do with others, we will send a letter to schools and our licensed daycares that we know of, and give them that extra notification. But I don't believe that typically those forms are given to students. But you know, administrators, teachers know what these persons look like, and so if they see that person doing anything suspicious, we encourage them to call. So I'll follow up with that information.
Thank you.
Thank you.
There's another question that I have from someone online that says, I live directly across from this man. My sister lives across as well. She has daughters ages 5, 13, 14, also a daughter who is 20 in a wheelchair. If we feel uneasy, can we call? Should we be worried? My niece walks to Taco John's where she works.
Sure, I'll jump in on that one. I think first and foremost, I don't want them to be worried. I want them to be aware. And so I actually have a slide, if you want to just click forward 2 slides, and I think it's really good for kids especially.
Okay.
Yep, one more, there. So this is a slide that's used a lot in like use of force training and like, and just dealing with where violence might erupt, but it works in so many different ways. And so when receiving information like this, our children will have a reaction. Now, it could be any one of these reactions, but what we seek, and this is for the community at large as well, is we want to move people out of that white zone, that kind of just like everything's hunky-dory and nothing bad will happen to me, right? You look at these kids today, they walk around with their heads down on their phones, they don't even look when they cross streets. We need more awareness, you know? But we also don't want them running at that high red level where it's just alert mode, constantly stressed out, where their anxiety is so high that they start sleeping poorly, their eating habits are changing, they aren't doing well in school, they're having a difficult time in their lives, right? We want to bring everyone to that yellow, that prepared, alert awareness. And so when you're thinking to this person that wrote in, I think it's a fantastic question. I don't want anyone saying, well, that's it, to my child, sweetheart, you cannot walk to Taco John's anymore because you might get hurt out there. Well, oh my God, I can't imagine how jarring that would be as a child to hear that. Like, are you kidding me? Like, can I go mow the lawn? Can I answer the door? It's going to be frightening. However, I don't want them also walking down that street thinking, if this guy approaches me and says, hey, it's cold out, you need a ride to Taco John's? I'll give you a ride. I don't want her getting in that car. And so having that appropriate conversation through that age-appropriate way is going to be so critical with that. I want her to have that autonomy. We all agree that child deserves that autonomy. She can walk in her city to a restaurant. She gets to have that. And that's important. And we as a community, we're going to make sure she's safe doing that. And because we're all here and our heads are all up and our eyes are all open, that little girl has that many more people looking out for her. And that's what I'm going for. So also to add to that family safety planning thing with all the other children, as she's thinking about this more broadly with her sister and her nieces and nephews, is really do reach out to some of these advocacy groups and talk to them about some family safety planning stuff. Add it into your family safety nights where you're talking about fire safety, weather safety, and all of that stuff. Bring this into it. I don't even want to act as though I'm the subject matter expert on this stuff. I hear the JWRC folks present their information to meetings like this, and it's fantastic. And I, as a parent, learn stuff every single time. There's what-if games you can play with kids. What would you do if? What would you do? How about games, right? Because we also need them to know, because it used to be stranger danger, right? We taught our kids that people we don't know are scary and dangerous. Well, in reality, that may be the person that's going to help you. That may be the cop or the fireman, or it may be the trusted, supportive parent with their own children that's going to help you when you get separated or lost, right? So it's about how to have those conversations. JWRC will say they've done things with kids where they say, draw a stranger for me. Draw someone that's a stranger, and they draw a menacing face with fangs and yellow eyes, right? They don't draw the nice neighbor who gives them their extra Halloween candy or offers to give them rides. So just keeping that in mind. I want you to be aware of him. You most certainly know who he is and where he lives in relation to you. I want your head up. I want your eyes open. But I want you living your life. You get to do that.
And the other part of that was, if we feel uneasy, can we call? And absolutely.
Absolutely. And I would also say that Alicia Magus is our community outreach specialist, and she works with kids a fair amount, and she has some resources, some things that could maybe, if you have kids or grandkids and you want to have that safety conversation, we also have some resources that you could use as well.
Perfect. Was there another question in the room too? I can't remember. I get in the zone. The questions come in.
So you said before that you felt you did your part by notifying us, and you said you released the information to the media. We didn't receive a letter in the mail at all about this. And I feel like when you say you've done your part, I feel that's false. I feel like media, people who don't have social media, people who don't listen to the radio, I mean, look how many people are here, how many people are online, like how many people are in this city that don't maybe have any idea what is happening. I mean, you do mail enough stuff out to us, the water bill, things like that. I feel it could have been included in there. The newsletter that came out.
And we could, I don't mean to Jeff, sorry.
Nope, go ahead.
Well, we would still do that. It's just, we wanted to get this meeting out there, and we, nothing to say that we can't do additional communication. The water billing, I don't know, goes out, was it every other month?
It's already out.
It's already out, so we can certainly include something in the next one.
Yeah, I
But
feel like
it's just
something
that
should have been out in the mail. I
We
mean,
were, well, and we,
we were notified by a friend who lives a couple blocks away. Otherwise, we wouldn't have any idea. So that's where I don't feel the part was done with the city, with notifying everybody.
It may help to just understand too the timeline, the time crunch that unfortunately law enforcement is under with these deadlines. So basically the way it works, especially with somebody that's off supervision, is they'll fill out the change of information, when they move. And if they don't go and directly knock on that door, it takes that processing time. And then we receive it, we distribute it, we say, okay, we gotta get this out there. And so unfortunately, it's on us too. We're pushing, hey chief, we gotta get this going. We would love nothing more than to go out and knock on doors, but it sounds like maybe there is some ways to do some additional layering. And like you heard the chief said too, this is a fairly new thing to Wade Park. Maybe somewhere in the annals of history, there's been a meeting before, but in the institutional collective memory, this is fairly.
and this was the first notification we were able to do. We needed to get a meeting out, and so here we are. That's not to say that we can't do more, and that we can't do something with the water billing. We certainly can.
Yeah,
So
I mean,
this
just
was
anything out in the mail.
this
I mean,
was
there's
the-
enough comes out to
the
us.
first step, maybe not the only step. So
Okay,
that helps.
thank you.
And just in that mailer could even reference like this taping, this video, and they can watch it online.
It'll be on our website. So I mean, again, well, our first step of notification, but not the only. So.
Good stuff. Any other questions? Everybody's like, Brad, it's 8:00. We're ready to go home and watch TV. Well, I know, just from my perspective, I want to thank you guys again. I can't say it enough for taking your time, your evening on a work night to come out here. We can probably, unless there's any online, we can probably gear out of the formal Q&A and log off the meeting and stuff and just kind of go to an informal. I'm here until the chief tells me, get out of here, go home. So I'm happy to talk to you on the side if you have questions or anything. Thank you. And thank you, chief, for hosting this meeting, for having us out, inviting us out to share this important information. Definitely.
Appreciate it.
To wait till they shut off my mic now so I don't say anything that my boss will be upset about.
I guess we're adjourned. Well, but like I say, Brad and I will stick around until all of your questions are answered. So thank you for coming tonight.